the Hudson Valley, West Point, Kingston, and Troy.
Table of Contents: the Hudson Valley, West Point, Kingston and Troy.
All about the Hudson Valley, West Point, Kingston and Troy. With visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and other points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. Dr. Sydney22@gmail.com. 2023. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof,
Zoe Phonemes,
and Nathan Koltove. For a complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to tiny.1/ytnavigator. Chapter 1. The United States Military Academy at West Point, also known as USMA, West Point, or Army, is a four-year coeducational federal service academy located at West Point, New York.
Established in 1802, United States Military Academy is the oldest of the United States 5 service academies. The military garrison at West Point was occupied in 1778 and played a key role in the Revolutionary War.
This is an aerial view of West Point. The academy sits on scenic high ground overlooking the Hudson River, 50 miles, 80 kilometers, north of New York City. The entire central campus is a national landmark and home to scores of historic sites, buildings, and monuments.
Most of the campus's neo-Gothic buildings are constructed from gray and black granite.
The campus is a popular tourist destination, complete with a large visitor center and the oldest museum in the United States Army.
Candidates for admission must both apply directly to the Academy and receive a nomination, usually from a member of Congress. Students are officers in training and are referred to as cadets. Tuition for cadets is fully funded by the Army in exchange for an active duty service obligation upon graduation.
Approximately 1,000 cadets graduate each spring and are commissioned as second lieutenants.
The academic program grants a Bachelor of Science degree with a curriculum that grades cadets' performance upon a broad academic program, military leadership performance, and mandatory participation in competitive athletics. Cadets are required to adhere to the Cadet Honor Code, which states that a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. Because of the Academy's age and unique mission, its traditions influenced other institutions. It was the first American college to have class rings, and its technical curriculum was a model for later engineering schools.
West Point's student body has a unique rank structure and lexicon. All cadets reside on campus and dine together en masse weekdays for breakfast and lunch. The dining hall can accommodate 5,000 cadets and officers.
The Academy fields 15 men's and 9 women's National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA, sports teams, while every student competes in at least one sport, either at the intramural or intercollegiate level, each semester.
The football team was a national power in the early 20th century, winning 3 national championships. The West Point alumni are collectively referred to as the Long Gray Line, and its ranks include 2 presidents of the United States, numerous famous generals, and 74 Medal of Honor recipients.
Chapter 2. West Point History.
West Point was first occupied by the Continental Army on January 27, 1778, making it the longest continually occupied post in the United States. It now has the distinction of being the oldest continuously used military establishment in the country. The Great Chain, 1778 to 1782. Chapter 3. The Hudson Valley in the Revolutionary War, 1776 to 1783.
The Hudson Valley became one of the major regions of conflict during the American Revolution. Part of the early strategy of the British was to sever the colonies in two by maintaining control of the Hudson River.
Once the New England colonies were separated from the other colonies, the war would be brought to a swift conclusion.
The Hudson River was a strategic waterway during the American Revolution. It was the scene of numerous battles, including the battles at Ticonderoga, Oriskany, and the decisive American victory at Saratoga. In August 1776, the British forces under General William Howe on Staten Island undertook an amphibious operation across the Narrows. They landed in Brooklyn, where they routed Washington's army at the Battle of Long Island.
The British plan was for Howe to send a fleet up the Hudson to meet Gen. Burgoyne coming south from Canada by Lake Champlain and Lieutenant Colonel St. Leger coming east along the Mohawk Valley.
Howe was to send a fleet up the Hudson to meet Burgoyne coming south from Canada by way of Lake Champlain and St. Leger coming east along the Mohawk Valley. St. Leger was to march east along the Mohawk Valley to meet Burgoyne and Howe.
Burgoyne was to march south from Canada by Lake Champlain to meet Howe and St. Leger at the Hudson River.
St. Leger was engaged by the American militia at the bloody Battle of Oriskany. He then laid siege to Fort Stanwix, but with the approach of the reinforcements of the Continental Army, he gave up and retreated to Canada. The troops sent north were delayed by skirmishes along the way and were too late to help Burgoyne.
Howe then changed his mind and sent most of his troops south to capture Philadelphia. Burgoyne's march was much delayed by skirmishes and the rugged terrain.
The battles we fought 19 days apart on the same ground. 9 miles, 14.5 kilometers south of Saratoga. Burgoyne, whose campaign to divide New England from the southern colonies had started well but slowed due to logistical problems, but won a small tactical victory of General Horatio Gates and the Continental Army in the September 19 Battle of Freeman's Farm at the cost of significant casualties.
Lacking help from St. Leger or Howe, Burgoyne was forced to surrender at the Second Battle of Saratoga. The Battles of Saratoga, sometimes referred to as the Battle of Saratoga, September 19 and October 7, 1777, conclusively decided the fate of British General John Burgoyne's army in the American Revolutionary War, and are generally regarded as a turning point in the war.
News of Burgoyne's surrender was instrumental in formally bringing France into the war as an American ally. France had previously given supplies, ammunition, and guns. The French formal participation changed the war into a global conflict. Chapter 4. The Great Chain, 1778 to 1782. The Hudson River's narrow width and sharp turns at West Point created adverse sailing conditions and prompted the construction of the Great Chain in 1778 as an obstacle to the movement of British ships north of West Point. West Point was chosen for the placement of the Great Chain because of the distinctive S-curve the Hudson makes there. This would force any large ship to slow down to navigate it, thus making the ship an easier target for artillery batteries.
The name of Fort Arnold was later changed from Arnold to Clinton. In the spring of 1778, the heavy chain supported by huge logs was stretched across the Hudson from West Point to Constitution Island, opposite.
American soldiers positioned the chain to impede the progress of a ship should it attempt to turn into the east-west channel against frequently unfavorable winds and a strong current.
Due to the lower Hudson River being an estuary, it is subject to significant tidal currents which make navigation by sailing vessels particularly difficult.
This is the West Point fortifications from 1778 to 1783, showing the Great Chain and a separate long boom placed downstream to absorb the momentum of any ship attempting to breach the chain.
Cannons were placed in forts and batteries on both sides of the river to destroy the ship as it slowed to a halt against the obstacle. When finally completed, the 600-yard chain contained iron links 2 feet in length and weighed 114 pounds, including swivels, clevises, and anchors. The chain weighed 65 tons.
For buoyancy, 40-foot, 12 meters, logs were cut into 16-foot, 4.9 meters, sections, waterproofed, and joined by fours into rafts fastened with 12-foot, 3.7 meters, timbers.
The northern end of the chain was anchored to Constitution Island, and the southern end was secured to a small cove on the western bank of the river. Both ends of the chain were anchored to log cribs filled with rocks, keeping the ends in place. A system of pulleys, rollers, ropes, and midstream anchors adjusted the chain's tension to overcome the effects of river currents and changing tides. Until 1783, the chain was removed each winter and reinstalled each spring to avoid destruction by ice.
The greater system of fortifications at West Point, of which the chain was part, was designed and built by Polish engineer Tadeusz Kosciuszko.
It was as commander of the fortifications at West Point that Benedict Arnold committed his infamous act of treason when he attempted to sell the fort to the British.
The British never attempted to run the chain, but in the course of his correspondence with the British, Benedict Arnold claimed that a well-loaded ship could break the chain.
The main fort at West Point had originally been named after Arnold, but was changed to Fort Clinton after Arnold's betrayal. Chapter 5. Congress formally authorized the establishment and funding of the United States Military Academy on March 16, 1802. Although cadets had been undergoing training in artillery and engineering studies at the garrison since 1794.
The first official graduates of the Academy were Joseph Gardner Swift and Simon M. Levy. Swift graduated in October 1802 and would later return as superintendent from 1812 to 1814.
The early years of the Academy were a tumultuous time, with few standards for admission or length of study. Cadets ranged in age from 10 to 37 and attended between 6 months to 6 years. The impending War of 1812 caused Congress to authorize a more formal system of education at the Academy, and increase the size of the Corps of Cadets to 250.
In 1817, Colonel Sylvanus Thayer became the superintendent and established the curriculum still in use to this day. Thayer instilled strict disciplinary standards, set a standard course of academic study, and emphasized honorable conduct. Known as the father of the Military Academy, Thayer is honored with a monument on campus for the profound impact he left on the Academy's history. Founded to be a school of engineering, for the first half of the 19th century, the United States Military Academy graduates gained recognition for engineering the bulk of the nation's initial railway lines, bridges, harbors, and roads.
The Academy was the only engineering school in the country until the founding of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 1824.
The Academy was so successful in its engineering curriculum that it significantly influenced every American engineering school founded before the Civil War. The Mexican-American War brought the Academy to prominence as graduates proved themselves in battle for the first time.
Future Civil War commanders Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee first distinguished themselves in battle in Mexico. In all, 452 of 523 graduates who served in the war received battlefield promotions or awards for bravery.
The school experienced a rapid modernization during the 1850s, often romanticized by the graduates who led both sides of the Civil War as the end of the Old West Point era.
New barracks brought better heat and gas lighting, while new ordnance and tactics training incorporated new rifle and musket technology and advances such as the steam engine.
With the outbreak of the Civil War, West Point graduates filled the general officer ranks of the rapidly expanding Union and Confederate armies. 294 graduates served as general officers for the Union, and 151 served as general officers for the Confederacy.
Of all living graduates at the time of the war, 105, 10%, were killed, and another 151, 15%, were wounded. Nearly every general officer of note from either army during the Civil War was a graduate of West Point.
And a West Point graduate commanded the forces of one or both sides in every one of the 60 major battles of the war.
After the Civil War, immediately following the Civil War, the Academy enjoyed unprecedented fame because of the role its graduates had played. However, the post-war years were a difficult time for the Academy as it struggled to admit and reintegrate cadets from former Confederate states.
The first cadets from southern states were each admitted in 1868. And 1870 saw the admission of the first African-American cadet, James Webster Smith of South Carolina. Smith endured harsh treatment and was eventually dismissed for academic deficiency under controversial circumstances in 1874.
As a result, Henry O. Flipper of Georgia became the first African-American graduate in 1877, graduating 50th in a class of 77. Two of the most notable graduates during this period were George Washington Goethals, from the class of 1880, and John J. Pershing from the class of 1886. Goethals gained prominence as the chief engineer of the Panama Canal. and Pershing would become famous for his exploits against the famed Pancho Villa in Mexico, and later for leading American forces during World War I.
Besides the integration of Southern state and African American cadets, the post-war academy also struggled with the issue of hazing. In its first 65 years, hazing was uncommon or non-existent beyond small pranks played upon the incoming freshmen, but it took a harsher tone as Civil War veterans began to fill the incoming freshman classes. The upper-class cadets saw it as their duty to teach the plebes their manners. Hazing at the academy entered the national spotlight with the death of former cadet Oscar Booz in 1901.
Congressional hearings, which included testimony by Douglas MacArthur, investigated his death and the pattern of systemic hazing of freshmen.
When MacArthur returned as superintendent, he tried to end the practice of hazing the incoming freshmen by placing Army sergeants in charge of training new cadets during freshman summer. The practice of hazing continued on some levels well into the late 20th century, but is no longer allowed in the present day.
The demand for junior officers during the Spanish-American War caused the class of 1899 to graduate early, and the Philippine insurrection did the same for the class of 1901. This increased demand for officers led Congress to increase the size of the Corps of Cadets to 481 cadets in 1900. The period between 1900 and 1915 saw a construction boom, as much of West Point's old infrastructure was rebuilt. Chapter 6. Many of the Academy's most famous graduates graduated during the 15 years between 1900 and 1915 include Douglas MacArthur, 1903.
Joseph Stilwell, 1904.
Henry Hap Arnold, 1907.
George S. Patton, 1909.
The class of 1915 is known as the class the stars fell on for the exceptionally high percentage of general officers that rose from that class, 59 of 164. The list includes Generals of the Army: Dwight D. Eisenhower, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, 1945 to 1948. Supreme Allied Commander Europe, 1949 to 1952. And President of the United States, 1953 to 1961. Omar N. Bradley, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, 1948 to 1949. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 1949 to 1953. Generals: James Van Fleet, Joseph T. McNarney. Lieutenant Generals: Henry Alron, Hubert R. Harmon, Stafford Leroy Irwin, Thomas B. Larkin, John W. Leonard, George E. Stratemeyer, and Joseph M. Swing. This is Dwight D. Eisenhower and Omar Bradley, both 1915. With war raging in Europe, Congress anticipated potential American involvement and increased the authorized strength to 1,332 cadets in 1916.
The outbreak of America's involvement in World War I caused a sharp increase in the demand for Army officers. The Academy accelerated the graduation for all three upper classes to meet this requirement. By the war's end in 1918, only the freshman cadets remained, those who had entered in the summer of 1918. Douglas MacArthur became superintendent in 1919, instituting sweeping reforms to the academic process, including introducing a greater emphasis on history and humanities.
MacArthur made major changes to the field training regimen, and the Cadet Honor Committee was formed under his watch in 1922. MacArthur was a firm supporter of athletics at the Academy. As he famously said, "Upon the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that, upon other fields, on other days, will bear the fruits of victory." West Point was first officially accredited in 1925, and in 1933 began granting Bachelor of Science degrees to all graduates. In 1935, the Academy's authorized strength was increased to 1,960 cadets.
World War II and Cold War. As World War II engulfed Europe, Congress authorized an increase to 2,496 cadets in 1942 and began graduating classes early. The class of 1943 graduated 6 months early in January 1943, and the following 4 classes graduated after only 3 years. To accommodate this accelerated schedule, summer training was formally moved to a recently acquired piece of land southwest of the main post. The site would later become Camp Buckner.
West Point played a prominent role in World War II. Over 5 of the 5-star generals were alumni, and nearly 500 graduates died. Immediately following the war in 1945, Maxwell Taylor, class of 1922, became superintendent. He expanded and modernized the academic program and abolished antiquated courses in fencing and horsemanship.
Unlike previous conflicts, the Korean War did not disrupt class graduation schedules. Over half of the Army leadership during the war was composed of Academy graduates. As a result, 157 alumni perished in the conflict.
Chapter 7. All West Point houses of worship are called chapels. This is the Cadet Chapel at West Point. The West Point Chapel seats 1,500, the size of the Corps of Cadets when it was built in 1910.
This is the West Point Chapel pipe organ. The West Point Chapel has the largest pipe organ in the world, with 23,500 pipes. This is the West Point Catholic Chapel.
This is the West Point Jewish Chapel.
This is the West Point Visitors Center. This is the West Point Museum. General Garrison H. Davidson became superintendent in 1956. He instituted several reforms that included refining the admissions process, changing the core curriculum to include electives, and increasing the academic degree standards for academy instructors. The 1960s saw the size of the Corps expand to 4,400 cadets, while the barracks and academic support structure grew proportionally. West Point was not immune to the social upheaval of American society during the Vietnam War. The first woman joined the faculty of the all-male institution amidst controversy in 1968. The Army granted its first honorable discharge to a West Point graduate who claimed conscientious objector status in 1971. The Academy struggled to fill incoming classes as its graduates led troops in Southeast Asia, where 273 graduates died. West Point admitted its first 119 female cadets in 1976 after Congress authorized the admission of women to the Federal Service Academies in 1975. Women currently comprise approximately 15% of entering new cadets.
3 females have been appointed as the first captain: Kristen Baker in 1989, Grace H. Chung in 2004, and Stephanie Hightower in 2006. Rebecca Marrier became the Academy's first female valedictorian in 1995. The first female West Point alumnus to attain flag, general officer, rank was Rebecca Halstead, class of 1981. Vincent Brooks became the first African American first captain in 1980.
During the Gulf War, alumnus General Schwarzkopf was the commander of the Allied forces.
And the American CNIO generals in Iraq, Generals David Petraeus and Ray Oderno, are also alumni.
Following the September 11th attacks, applications for admission to the Academy increased dramatically. Security on campus was improved, and the curriculum was revamped to include coursework on terrorism and military drills in civilian environments.
67 graduates have died during operations related to Operation Iraqi Freedom and the ongoing global war on terror.
Chapter 8. The West Point Campus.
The Academy is located approximately 50 miles, 80 kilometers, north of New York City on the western bank of the Hudson River. West Point is incorporated as a federal military reservation in Orange County and is adjacent to Highland Falls.
Based on the significance of both the Revolutionary War fort ruins and the military academy itself, most of the academy area was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1960.
In 1841, Charles Dickens visited the academy and said, "It could not stand on more appropriate ground, and any ground more beautiful can hardly be."
One of the most visited and scenic sites on Post, Trophy Point, overlooks the Hudson River to the north.
Trophy Point is home to many captured cannons from past wars, as well as being designed by Stanford White.
These buildings are nearly all constructed from granite with a predominantly gray and black hue. The barracks that were built in the 1960s were designed to mimic this style. Other buildings on Post, notably the oldest private residences for the faculty, are built in the Federal, Georgian, or English Tudor styles. A few buildings, such as Cullum Hall and the Old Cadet Chapel, are built in the neoclassical style.
The Academy grounds are home to numerous monuments and statues. The Central Cadet Parade Ground, the Plain, hosts the largest number and includes the Washington Monument, Thayer Monument, Eisenhower Monument, MacArthur Monument, Kosciuszko Monument, and Sedgwick Monument.
This is the Washington Monument.
This is the Thayer Monument.
This is the Eisenhower Monument.
This is the MacArthur Monument. This is the Kosciuszko Monument. The Sedgwick Monument is a memorial to Union General John Sedgwick at West Point and was dedicated in 1868. Officers and soldiers of the 6th Army Corps erected the monument to commemorate Major General Sedgwick and his death at the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse in 1864.
Legend holds that if a cadet is deficient in academics, the cadet should go to the monument at midnight the night before the term and examination, in full dress, under arms, and spin the rowels on the monument spurs. With the resulting good luck, the cadet will pass the test.
A monument to George S. Patton was dedicated in front of the Cadet Library in 1950. But in 2004, it was placed in storage to make room for the construction of Jefferson Hall, and has yet to be relocated. There is also a statue commemorating brotherhood and friendship from the L'École Polytechnic in the Cadet Central area just outside Nininger Hall. The remaining campus area is home to 27 other monuments and memorials. The West Point Cemetery is the final resting place of many notable graduates and faculty, including George Armstrong Custer, William Westmoreland, Earl Blake, Maggie Dixon, and 16 Medal of Honor recipients.
The West Point Cemetery is also the burial place of several recent graduates who have died during the ongoing global war on terror.
Many of the older grave sites have large and ornate grave markers, the largest belonging to Egbert Veal, class of 1847, chief engineer of Brooklyn's Prospect Park. The cemetery is also home to a monument to Revolutionary War heroine Margaret Corbin.
West Point is home to historic athletic facilities like Michie Stadium and Gillis Field House, and modern facilities such as the Lichtenberg Tennis Center, Anderson Rugby Complex, and the Lou Gross Gymnastics Facility.
Michie Stadium can accommodate 40,000 spectators and recently underwent a significant upgrade in facilities for the football team. The Academy installed a new artificial turf field in the summer of 2008.
The Visitor Center is just outside the Fairgate in the village of Highland Falls, and offers the opportunity to arrange a guided tour. These tours, which are the only way the public can access the Academy grounds, leave the Visitor Center several times a day. The West Point Museum is directly adjacent to the Visitor Center in the renovated Olmsted Hall on the grounds of the former Latticliff College. Originally opened to the public in 1854, the West Point Museum is the oldest military museum in the country. During the summer months, the museum operates access to the Fort Putnam Historic Site on the main post.
Chapter 9. The commanding officer at the United States Military Academy is the superintendent. This position is roughly equivalent to the president of a civilian university. Still, due to his status as the commanding general of the academy, the superintendent holds more influence over the daily lives of the cadets than would a civilian university president.
Since 1812, all superintendents have been West Point graduates. Though this has never been an official prerequisite to hold that position in recent years, the position of superintendent has been held by a lieutenant general. The current superintendent, Lieutenant General Steve Gilland, took command in 2022. The Academy is a direct reporting unit, and the superintendent reports directly to the Army Chief of Staff.
The Academy is also overseen by the Board of Visitors, a panel of senators, congressional representatives, and presidential appointees.
Currently, the Board of Visitors is chaired by U.S. Representative Steve Womack and is composed of 4 senators, 5 congressmen, and 6 presidential appointees.
The admission process consists of 2 parts. Candidates must apply directly to the United States Military Academy for admission, and they must obtain a nomination. Most candidates receive their nominations from their members of Congress.
The nomination process is not political, and applicants do not have to know the congressman to be nominated. The nomination process typically consists of writing essays, obtaining letters of recommendation, and a formal interview.
These are the steps in the admission process.
These are the basic requirements for admission to West Point. Admission to West Point is selective. 12.75% of applicants were admitted, a total of 1,292, to the class of 2012. The Academy considers an applicant's race as a criterion for admission to ensure a diverse student body. Candidates must be between 17 and 23 years old, unmarried, and with no legal obligation to support a child. Above average high school or previous college grades and strong performance on standardized testing are expected. To be eligible for an appointment, candidates must also undergo a candidate fitness assessment and a complete physical exam. About 15 candidates are admitted each year from foreign countries at the expense of the sending nation. These are the components of the West Point class of 2016. Candidates may have previous college experience, but they may not transfer, meaning that regardless of previous college credit, they enter the Academy as a fourth-class cadet and undergo the entire four-year program. If a candidate is considered qualified but not selected, they may receive an offer to attend the United States Military Academy Preparatory School. Upon graduation from the preparatory school, these candidates are appointed to the Academy if they receive the recommendation of the preparatory school commandant and meet medical admission requirements.
Chapter 10. West Point is a medium-sized, highly residential baccalaureate college with a full-time, four-year undergraduate program that emphasizes instruction in the arts, sciences, and professions with no graduate program.
There are 31 academic majors, and the most popular majors are in foreign languages, management information systems, history, economics, and mechanical engineering. Military officers comprise 75% of the faculty, while civilian professors comprise the remaining 25% of faculty positions.
A cadet's class rank, which determines the Army branch and assignment upon graduation, is calculated as a combination of academic performance, 55%, military leadership performance, 30%, and physical fitness and athletic performance, 15%.
The 2008 Forbes magazine report on America's best colleges ranks West Point number 6 nationally and number 1 among public institutions. The 2008 National Liberal Arts College category in U.S. News & World Report ranks West Point number 14 among liberal arts colleges and number 1 among public institutions.
Chapter 11. All cadets receive commissioning as second lieutenants upon graduation, so military and leadership education is combined with academic instruction.
The Department of Military Instruction is responsible for all military arts and sciences education as well as planning and executing the Cadet Summit training.
As with all soldiers in the Army, cadets also must pass the Army Physical Fitness Test twice per year. Additionally, during their junior year, cadets must pass the indoor obstacle course test. Because of the Academy's congressional nomination process, students come from all 50 states. The Academy is also authorized up to 60 Allied Nation exchange cadets, who undergo the same 4-year curriculum as fully integrated members of the Corps of Cadets.
Cadets attend the United States Military Academy free of charge, with all tuition and board paid for by the Army in return for a service commitment of 5 years of active duty and 3 years of reserve status upon graduation.
This is the demographics of the student body, together with the corresponding numbers from the U.S. Census. The motto of the class of 2012 is "For more than ourselves."
Chapter 12. Kingston, New York.
Kingston is a city on the west bank of the Hudson River.
The population of Kingston is 24,000.
The city of Kingston is on the eastern border of Ulster County and is the county seat. This shows Kingston and its vicinity. This shows Kingston and its vicinity.
This shows Kingston and its vicinity. This shows Kingston and its vicinity.
Chapter 13. The history of Kingston.
The city of Kingston was first called Esopus after a local Indian tribe, and then it was called Wiltwyck. It was one of the 3 large settlements in New Netherland, the other 2 being Beverwyck and Manhattan, centered around New Amsterdam.
In 1777, Kingston became the first capital of New York. Shortly after the Battle of Saratoga, the city was burned by British troops moving up the Hudson River from New York City. The area was a major granary for the colonies at the time, so the British burned large amounts of wheat in all but 1 or 2 of the buildings. In 1797, the capital was re-established at Albany.
The town of Rondout, now a part of Kingston, became an important freight hub for the transportation of coal from Pennsylvania to New York City through the Delaware and Hudson Canal.
The Delaware and Hudson Canal was a 108-mile, man-made waterway, an engineering feat of pre-industrial America that brought a new form of energy from the hills of Pennsylvania out to the Hudson River. From 1828 to 1898, mules pulled barges laden with anthracite coal along river valleys from northeastern Pennsylvania to the Rondout Creek near the villages of Kingston and Rondout. From here, it was shipped on barges down the Hudson to New York City and up the river to Canada. The Delaware and Hudson Canal ended at the Hudson River at Kingston, after running northeast from the coal fields of northeastern Pennsylvania.
Completed in 1828, the Delaware and Hudson Canal was the first $1 million private enterprise in America. During its 70 years of active duty, it was the main economic artery for the Northeast.
The canal operated successfully until the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company made a unique transition in 1898 into a railroad company, becoming America's oldest continuously operating transportation company.
This hub was later used to transport other goods, including bluestone. Kingston shaped and shipped most of the bluestone made to create the sidewalks of New York City. cement deposits we found throughout the valley. The Newark Lime and Cement Company shipped cement throughout the U.S. It was a thriving business until the invention of the Kiepe, quick-drying Portland cement. Large warehouses of ice sat beside the Hudson River from which the ice was cut during the winter and preserved all yet to be used in early refrigeration.
Large brick-making factories were also located close to this shipping hub.
Rondout's central location as a shipping hub ended with the advent of railroads that ran through Rondout and Kingston, but could transport their loads through the town without stopping. This is the Kingston Lighthouse.
The downtown area of Kingston, once the town of Rondout, is also a historic district and borders the Rondout Creek.
Kingston historically was an important transportation center for the region. The Hudson River, Rondout Creek, and Delaware and Hudson Canal were important commercial waterways. At one time, Kingston was served by 4 railroad companies and 2 trolley lines. Therefore, Kingston was designated as a New York State Heritage Area with a transportation theme.
The Hudson River Maritime Museum is the only museum in New York State exclusively preserving the maritime history of the Hudson River, its tributaries, and the industries that developed around it.
The Hudson River Maritime Museum has exhibits on Hudson River maritime history, a gift shop, waterfront special events, and boat rides to the historic Rondout Lighthouse. This is the Hudson River Maritime Museum.
This is in the Hudson River Maritime Museum.
The current Rondout Lighthouse is the 3rd lighthouse built at the mouth of Rondout Creek. The first Kingston Lighthouse was built in 1837. This wood structure became badly damaged by ice and weather and soon became unsafe.
The second lighthouse of brick and stone was constructed in 1867 on the south side of the creek, but was abandoned in 1915.
In 1913 construction started on a new lighthouse, which is the structure known to area residents today as the Rondout Lighthouse. The largest and last family light built on the Hudson River. The 3rd Rondout Lighthouse was first lit in 1915.
This is the Rondout Historic District. This is the Rondout Historic District. This is a map of the Rondout Historic District.
This is a map of the Rondout Historic District available at the Visitor Center. Chapter 14. Troy, New York.
Troy is located on the Hudson River just north of Albany. Troy is located on the Hudson River just north of Albany. This shows the location of Troy on the Hudson River, just 8 miles north of Albany.
The Federal Lock and Dam is on the Hudson River by Troy.
The major function of the Federal Dam is to improve navigability. It is located at mile 153 of the Hudson River, measuring from the beginning of the Hudson as a federally navigable waterway near the Battery in Manhattan.
The location of the dam marks the northern end of the Hudson River estuary.
The first full obstruction on the Hudson River from Manhattan is the Federal Dam. This marks the end of the river as a tidal estuary 150 miles from Battery Park. A lock on the east side of the dam allows boats to continue northward and through a long series of locks into the Great Lakes via the Mohawk River and Erie Canal, and to the St. Lawrence River in Canada via the Champlain Canal.
This is the first lock encountered by vessels passing from the Hudson River into the Great Lakes through the Erie Canal, and was opened in 1916. Troy is located on the western edge of Rensselaer County and the eastern bank of the Hudson River, and it is the county seat of Rensselaer County.
The population of Troy is 49,000. Troy's motto is Ilium fuit, Troia est, which means Ilium was, Troy is.
Troy has close ties with the nearby cities of Albany and Schenectady, forming the Capital District. Troy is one of the three major centers for the Albany-Schenectady-Troy Metropolitan Statistical Area, with a population of 879,000.
This is the Troy waterfront and the Hudson River.
Troy is home to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, Russell Sage College, Hudson Valley Community College, and the Emma Willard School, and it was the hometown of Uncle Sam.
Chapter 15. The History of Troy, New York.
The site of the city was a part of the Van Rensselaer Grant of 1629. Dirk van der Heyden was one of the first settlers in 1707. He purchased a farm of 65 acres which in 1787 was laid out as a village.
In the post-Revolutionary War years, as central New York was first settled, there was a strong trend to classical names. Troy's naming fits the same pattern as the New York cities of Syracuse, Rome, Utica and Ithaca, or the towns of Sempronius, Manlius, or dozens of other classically named cities to the west of Troy. The name Troy, after the legendary city of Troy, made famous in Homer's Iliad, was adopted in 1789. And the region was formed into the town of Troy in 1791 from part of the Rensselaer Wick Manor. Troy became a village in 1801 and was chartered as a city in 1816.
Northern and western New York was a theater in the War of 1812, and militia and regular army forces were led by Stephen Van Rensselaer of Troy, who later founded Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in 1824.
Quartermaster supplies were shipped through Troy. A local butcher and meat packer named Samuel Wilson supplied the military. According to an unprovable legend, barrels stamped U.S. were jokingly taken by the troops to stand for Uncle Sam, meaning Wilson.
And Troy has since claimed to be the historical home of Uncle Sam.
This is the Uncle Sam Monument in Troy. Before its rise as an industrial center, Troy was the transshipment point for meat and vegetables from Vermont, which were sent by the Hudson River to New York City. This trade was vastly increased after the construction of the Erie Canal,
which had its eastern terminus directly across the Hudson from Troy at Cohoes in 1825.
Through much of the 19th and into the early 20th century, Troy was not only one of the most prosperous cities in New York State, but one of the most prosperous cities in the entire country.
Troy's one-time great wealth was produced by the steel industry with the first American Bessemer converter. The industry first used charcoal and iron ore from the Adirondacks. Later, ore and coal from the Midwest were shipped on the Erie Canal to Troy and processed there before being sent on down the Hudson to New York City. After the Civil War, the steel production industry moved west to be closer to raw materials.
The presence of iron and steel also made it possible for Troy to be an early site in the development of iron storefronts and steel structural supports in architecture. And there are some significant early examples still in the city.
Chapter 16. Several important educational advances took place in Troy, especially in scientific education and the education of women. Under the patronage of Stephen Van Rensselaer, Troy was the home of the first strictly scientific academic institution in the United States, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, founded in 1824, and which trained that corps of students who later founded the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Sheffield Scientific School at Yale, and virtually every subsequent American scientific academic institution.
This scientific and technical proficiency was supported by the presence of the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, one of the highest-ranked engineering schools in the country.
The Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute is said to be the oldest technological university in the English-speaking world. The institute is known for its success in the transfer of technology from the laboratory to the marketplace.
Chapter 17. On December 23, 1823, the Troy Sentinel was the first publisher of the world-famous Christmas poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, also known as The Night Before Christmas or Twas, The Night Before Christmas. The poem was published anonymously. Its author has long been believed to have been Clement Clark Moore, but its author is now regarded by a few to have been Henry Livingston, Jr. Chapter 18. In addition to the strong presence of the early American steel industry, Troy was a manufacturing center for shirts, shirtwaists, collars, and cuffs. In 1825, Hannah Montague was tired of cleaning her blacksmith husband's shirts.
Hannah cut off the collars of her husband's shirts since only the collar was soiled, bound the edges, and attached strings to hold them in place. This also allowed the collars and cuffs to be starched separately. Hannah Montague's idea caught on and changed the fashion for American men's dress for a century.
Her patented collars and cuffs were first manufactured in Troy, and this led to the production of arrow shirts. When the iron and steel industry moved to Pennsylvania and beyond, and with a similar downturn in the collar industry, Troy had to deal with not only the loss of its manufacturing base, but a loss of population and wealth to suburbs and other parts of the country.
Troy's population in 1910 was of 75,000. And this is more than 50% equal than today. These factors have led to a sizable degree of dilapidation and disinvestment. Although numerous efforts have been made to preserve Troy's architectural and cultural past, Troy's prosperity began to fade.
Troy is home to many samples of Victorian architecture and ironwork. The city has many intact Tiffany stained glass windows in their original architectural settings.
With much 19th century architecture, particularly in the central Troy Historic District, several major movies have been filmed in Troy, including Ironweed, Age of Innocence, Scent of a Woman, The Bostonians, The Emperor's Club, and The Time Machine.
There are many buildings in a state of disrepair, but community groups and investors are restoring many of them.
This is a satellite view of Troy and the Hudson River.
Recommended videos. Recommended video, U.S. Military Academy, West Point. Explained.
Recommended video, West Point Campus Tour. Recommended video, West Point Documentary USMA. Recommended video, Top-rated things to do in Kingston and why. Recommended video, 5 best things to do in Troy, New York. Recommended video, Troy, New York, a brief overview. Table of contents, the Hudson Valley, West Point, Kingston and Troy.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.